Today I wanted to speak about expanding our capacity for feeling and sensing. And, in a way we could say, all of the guidance I offer, which I've received from other Buddhist teachers. And I think, probably all spiritual teachers is all about our relationship to experience. How can we learn to stay open to our experience as it is without kind of drifting off into thinking. I think that's the essence, of spiritual practice. Basically, don't think about the world, but notice the world. Because the world or reality is already, is already doing the job. It is already displaying to us the laws of nature and the way things are. It's just because, of the cognitive and the emotional filters, which are the result of our conditioning, we see things in a way which is distorted. And then, we make stories out of that and become protagonists in those stories. And then, we trip over those stories and it's painful. Or there's a lot of suffering, And in this particular series, which is called the Earth Worm Practice for the Anthropocene, I'm looking at this on a more like cultural, global level, how we have gotten ourselves into such a mess with the eco-social challenges and the, basically eco-social crisis, which is slowly but surely building up. And all of us, notice it in some way or another. Even, we are still in very privileged situations as, white people in the global north, but others, who have contributed much less to the crisis are already implicated by it much more than we are. So we are sitting in the midst of a lot of unresolved issues. And it's not about, that we're going to fix it or anything, but at least, we have a certain willingness to attend to it. And I think that's what brings us together in this meeting, the willingness to take it in, take it in portions, because, we don't want to be completely overstimulated and traumatized and kind of break down. That would be not useful. But being willing, to start chewing like an earthworm, just start chewing that which is in front of our nose, and then just continuing to digest and metabolize. And doing that together is like so much easier, because we are creating, even on Zoom, we are creating like a bigger energetic holding space. And I'm sure you can feel that already, I think even it might be unconsciously felt, but something makes you come here because you somehow, know that you are benefiting on one level. And that makes me really happy, because I certainly benefit from you joining. And, even we are not many people, but also gives me a total opportunity, to hone my skills, to synthesize the material I bring, because my intention is, to use the early Buddhist teachings as a foundation, which is very sturdy, like a real big anchor, and then weave in, the contemporary challenges, so that we can experience the healing power of the teaching inside of these contemporary questions, which are different than they were in Iron Age India, when the Buddha was walking there and spreading his teaching. They were in principle the same, because they are all created by greed, hatred, and delusion, but how they manifested was certainly different. And the zeitgeist was a different one. For example, the position of women and all of those things, there has a lot of change been happening since then. So inside of all of that, I'd like to try, to bring out the healing power of the teaching, how it applies to our times right now, so that we can, have a benefit in our own lives, but then also benefit, the life around us. And slowly but surely, become the immune system, which, brings out the next level of responsiveness, which we have as Homo sapiens. We are a very creative species, not in the sense necessarily, that we're going to think it all out in our heads, but we can make ourselves into vehicles for that evolutionary intelligence, which is a very creative flow, which can be, quote unquote, channeled, by those who open themselves to it, by basically clearing out some space, in the heart, in the mind, and inviting that energy to move through us. And I think that's what I'd like to do. And it might sound all a little bit kind of weird, but I think it is not something which is out of our reach, because it's a matter of intention, really, to invite in this energy, which is all around us, and to invite it in order to embody it. And I have, what's called the Aloka Earth Room prayer, and there's one sentence which speaks to that very clearly and which I really love. So I'm rather going to read it than try to paraphrase it. Here it is. We recognize that the evolutionary force that puts the stars in motion is moving through us and is a dynamic, self-organizing process whose grace and guidance we can trust. So it's that evolutionary force whose grace and guidance we can trust. That's, I think, I'd like to invite. And it's the same as the Dhamma anyway. It's just like a different way of naming it, and some call it God, some call it, Allah, and some call it maybe Shiva. There are so many different words, but in the end of the day, that's what it is. And in order, to make space for it, we have to just clear out this assumption, clear out the conditioning, and then invite that in. And then, see what happens. And that's what I'd like to do with those meditations as well, in a more or less, kind of contemporary balance, because that, gives a additional kind of energetic flavor to it, which is coming from this time, and it has a higher frequency because it's closer to where we are right now. I think then if we are trying to connect with something which is very, very old, we need to, I feel, take the essence of that old, ancient, precious teaching, but then close it into contemporary balance if we want to really be meeting the times where we are in now. And I think it's always been that way. There is a way to preserve the tradition, but also to innovate. And those two, they need to go together. To only preserve and not innovate is deadening. And to only innovate and not preserve is going to mix everything up. So we need to have the middle way, where both are working together. New and ancient ways of being. And So today I want to maybe set the tone by reading this poem which I brought. It's from a woman called Emily Lygren, and she lives actually in San Rafael here. To my surprise, I Googled her, and I share a poem with you now, and it's called The News. Each morning, we listen for what is breaking. The sound of 1,000 tragedies fills the air, shattering that never stops. Headlines, a fleet of anchors tangled at our feet. We watch worried. If we turn away even for an instant, it will all crumble the rest of the way. Forget with me for a moment. Take an unguarded breath. Do it now. The world needs your attention here too. On the rise and fall of your shoulders, the rustle of leaves outside the window, the warm space between your gaze and mine. Do it now. The world needs your attention here too. On the rise and fall of your shoulders, the rustle of leaves outside the window, the warm space between your gaze and mine. So, it always comes back to the middle way, not getting stuck in extremes. And the middle way is one of the synonyms, how the Buddha's teaching was named. It's called the middle way or the middle path. And, so how can we expand our capacity for sensing, for that capacity to really be with our sensual experience rather than getting carried away, in thinking. And we can see it, when we meditate, when the mind settles, the senses come alive. And what we do notice is, hearing, smelling, seeing, and all of the other sense activities is not something we are doing, but it's something which is just happening. And what I think what we need to do is to expand that capacity so that we can connect, with the web of relationships, with the web of life we are already embedded in. But we don't notice it. We feel, we feel disconnected, we feel alone, we feel, unreceived, we feel ungrounded. Even all of that is constantly happening all around us, but there somehow we don't have the capacity to sense it, because our senses have been, some of the senses have been so overstimulated with the news, for example, or with the different information technology, and so much information is flooding us that we have numbed ourselves, against it. And desperately looking, for some kind of fulfillment in places where it can't really be found. So if we want to really address this, we need to find back to our senses. And through that, find back into the connection with all life around us, like some of our indigenous brothers and sisters, they have preserved that capacity over the centuries because they were protected from being so overstimulated. And we have made life into an enormous project of insulating ourselves against nature in a way, and trying to extract from nature and protecting ourselves against her. And in several ways, that starts to backfire now. In all of those projects we have undertaken, science and technology with very good intentions, probably, mostly, but it's starting to backfire because that is not the way to go about things, to try to show ourselves off, to try to, close the door on nature and just allow certain things in and not others, and trying to throw things away where there is no way. So we are starting to wake up, that all of that just doesn't add up. It was just a certain stage, of history and of evolution where we were falling prey to these worldviews because of the way of development where we were then. But now we do understand that's not doable. This approach is backfiring more and more, and we need to come out of this. We need to grow out of this. And one way, how that is explained, why we have been living like this is our collective and individual traumas, which we have accumulated over time. They are interrupting the capacity for relationship, because trauma interrupts capacity for relationship because we shut down. And this is, an intelligent response, because shutting down in the face of overwhelm is a very good thing to do. But then, once the situation has passed, if we still embody it, again and again, and not being able to emerge out of that response, then we are just stuck, really. And that's, what we are starting to notice, or some people start to notice, that the way how we live on the planet, the systems we have built, such as capitalism and other systems, patriarchy, that they are like, they are like repeat. Even we can see how much mess, they are actually creating, and they are no longer really responses which work. We are still stuck in it, like a stuck wheel, repeating. And that's, why we need to try to turn on our capacity for sensing, because we cannot respond from the mind only. We have to, through sensing and feeling, we need to understand that we are already embedded in a web of relationships. We don't need to continue to look for fulfillment by trying to control nature, but we need to become team players. And in order for us to be able to do this, we need to train our capacity for sensing and have it come online much more fully. And that's something we really can do, and that's something I try to bring out, through those meditations. So basically reacquainting ourselves with life as it is, the raw vulnerability of life, and being okay with that, or training ourselves to be increasingly okay with that. I think that's what I try to work with in these meditations on the Wednesdays in particular. So inviting, really inviting the rawness of life to inform us in a way, to kind of enter our form, so that we will respond from a place of much greater embeddedness and connectedness with nature, and that we ourselves are part of nature, and the way how nature works is just the way how it works. And we ourselves trying to isolate ourselves against nature is never going to work. It's much better that we gonna become team players, and join in and take it on. What else is there left to us? So, using the Buddhist meditations and applying them in a way of, putting down the defenses, just one by one, through really deeply acquainting ourselves with life as it is, and accepting the vulnerability, and also seeing, that evolution is actually increasing vulnerability. In the beginning, there was like, very simple life forms, or, like alligators and turtles, which are much less vulnerable than we are. But they also have less capacity for creativity and opening. And our bodies are incredibly vulnerable. We have very little to protect ourselves. They're very soft bodies, and they're very dependent on so many things, being within a certain range so that we can actually survive. But by accepting that vulnerability, we become increasingly invulnerable, because the ego becomes smaller and smaller, and there's less need for hiding and defending, because we are more and more in the flow, and we can live from that place, and we can allow that flow to manifest through us and be also of benefit. So let us now, change over to a meditation posture. And getting back to the beginning. And we don't have to work hard. And we can just allow, the breath to take us into the body. And let our nervous system guide us. With the intention to build our capacity to connect by sensing. First, just sensing our bodies from inside. And that's, Vedana, feeling tone. How does it feel? Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? Just taking that in. And then, feeling the weight on the cushion or on the chair, the gravitational pull towards the earth, which is our basis. And when the mind is quite still, and the senses come alive, can you sense your deep relatedness to the earth? That's what that exercise is all about. Can we shift our identification from being caught in the thinking mind. And can we come back to something much vaster than our individual patterns of thinking? It's like a homecoming, you know. This embeddedness in this much vaster field. This living field of life. Which we need to relate to as long as we do have a body. We certainly, can cultivate the mind and consciousness, but we also need to work with our bodies. We cannot just work with the mind. We need to work with our bodies as well. And there's a heart, which connects the mind and the body. We can't leave anything out. And in these times, at the end of patriarchy, there's more and more returning back to embodiment. We have, we coming back, returning back from one extreme coming back to the middle. And allowing ourselves to wake up to the fact that we are already embedded. And building, the capacity to sense that. Build the connective tissue through repetition, like learning a skill. Because it is a skill. It's just like melting the permafrost of defense mechanisms and traumatic materials through practicing in this way and through doing it as a group, even a small group. It's helpful to co-regulate with others. So, remembering that these bodies of ours, they are like a mounting animal, a riding animal, which we have borrowed from nature. A riding animal for consciousness. So that consciousness can, make experiences and become more open, less crowded with assumptions. By checking it out, through living in the world with a body which is nature. So that's not like a little side issue, but this is very central to our existence, the body, and its deep embeddedness. It needs to be investigated and understood by, drawing really close. And taking an interest. So you're feeling the body from inside. And sensing, how it is deeply, constantly exchanging with planet Earth in terms of, earth element, water element, fire element, wind and space. And the whole thing happens in space. And those elements, which currently make up the body, they have been recycled over and over again. They have been moving through so many bodies of mountains, trees, whales, any other animals and plants, other human beings. This is such a vast process, with a self-regulating intelligence. Which we cannot really observe, but we are part of it. We are inside of that process. And that's about what we need to start to understand. We are not outside of it looking at it objectively, but we are inside of that process. We are part of it. And we can start, recognizing that by first feeling our bodies from inside. And then somehow, starting to open up and sensing this aliveness in our bodies. It's like a hum. And then, staying with that humming and, listening into the space around the body. the space which is limitless and doesn't end at the walls of this room we are sitting in. Listening into the space, so to say, or the silence. And I'm noticing there is no real boundaries. This is just all energetic manifestations which, through the limited capacity of our sense organs, we experience it in a certain way. But then if we go deeper, it starts to be experienced in a different way. When those filters are in abeyance, there's a different experience, which is as valid as the other experience is. And which, ideally will bring us to the middle path again of, the Buddha saying, I do not say that things exist or do not exist. I teach dependent origination. Everything is dependently arisen. And in and of themselves, all phenomena are empty. Empty of a self, empty of an unchanging core. This is why it's so important, to work on the mind, but not a mind which is disembodied, but a mind which is having, different bodies as riding animals, mounting animals, so that there can be experiences which teach us about reality. And you're noticing, if the mind is really open in this way, not, grasping or clinging, sense of subtle contentment or joy might be there. You're noticing that. And then we can just let go of the spaciousness and of the silence and become aware of that which knows about the spaciousness and the silence. Making a kind of a U-turn, awareness becoming aware of itself. Like a mirror becoming aware of its capacity to reflect. And resting in that capacity to reflect effortlessly. And that's what we call, the refuge in Buddha, in Buddhism. This capacity to reflect, to know, rather than identifying with or going under. That is the refuge in Buddha. Not in a person, but in this capacity which we all naturally have, or rather are. And this capacity to reflect creates a lot of space for things to take their natural course and unbind, starting to move again, becoming alive. And to fully be alive would be, complete unbinding. And unbinding is one way how the word nibbana is translated. Just, noticing how you feel, as a human being, looking at yourself in this way. yourself, quote unquote, so to say. You're seeing your situation in much wider context. When I see myself like that, there's a certain vibrancy, which comes back into the body and the mind. Like a sense of connectedness with something so much vaster than my little problems and trials. The inviting emergence, stepping out of the repetition of these patterns into a bigger life space. Stepping out of the hamster wheel of repetition. And then, for the last few minutes of the meditation, just, coming back to the breath. The ever-changing flow of the breath, which is one of the many ways how we are in constant exchange with the biosphere. We are the biosphere. there's not a single piece or anything which doesn't come from the biosphere.